If you've ever driven across America in the middle of the night, you know how strangely quiet the highways become. The farther you get from the cities, the more it feels like the road belongs to someone or something else. Truck drivers tell stories about phantom headlights, abandoned cars, and voices that come over the CB radio when no one else is around. Most of those stories are just stories, but one truck driver from Nebraska insists that what happened to him 2 years ago was very real. He says a voice on Channel 19 saved his life more than once. The problem is, no one can explain who was talking. My name is Ryan. I've been driving long-haul trucks for almost 15 years. Before that, I served 4 years in the Army. Between those 2 jobs, I've spent more nights on lonely roads than I have in my own bed. I've seen things that would make most people nervous. Cars abandoned in the middle of nowhere. People walking along the interstate at 3 in the morning. Even the occasional bear wandering across the road. After a while, you stop paying attention, because if you let every strange thing get inside your head, you'll never finish your route. At least, that's what I believed, until October 14th. That date is burned into my memory so clearly that I don't even have to think about it. It was a Tuesday, cold enough for frost to form on the fields before sunrise. I had picked up a refrigerated trailer loaded with medical supplies outside Omaha, Nebraska. The load was headed to Reno, Nevada. Nothing unusual. I'd driven that route dozens of times. Dispatch wanted the shipment there by the following afternoon, which meant driving through the night. I actually preferred night driving. Less traffic, fewer impatient drivers cutting in front of an 80,000-pound truck. Just empty highways, country music, and the occasional conversation over the CB radio. That night started exactly like every other run. I stopped for coffee around 10, filled both thermoses, checked the tires, inspected the trailer. Everything looked perfect. At 11:15 p.m., I merged onto Interstate 80 heading west. The first couple of hours were uneventful. A few trucks passed me. I chatted briefly with another driver about road construction near Cheyenne. Nothing memorable. Around 1:30 in the morning, traffic disappeared completely. I hadn't seen another vehicle for nearly 15 minutes. The road stretched straight ahead, like a black ribbon disappearing into darkness. Cornfields had given way to endless open plains. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds. Even the stars were gone. It was one of those nights where your headlights seem too weak, like the darkness is swallowing the light before it reaches the road. I reached for my coffee. It was already cold. As I took a sip, the CB radio crackled. Static, then silence. I barely noticed. Old radios do that all the time. Another burst of static followed, longer this time, then a calm male voice, clear, close. Blue Freightliner heading west. I instinctively looked into both mirrors. There wasn't another truck behind me, none ahead of me either, just empty pavement. I picked up the microphone. Yeah? A pause. Then the voice spoke again. Ease it back toward the center. I frowned. What are you talking about? Your right tires. Without thinking, I glanced down at the lane markings. My heart skipped. The truck had drifted farther right than I'd realized. The passenger side tires were inches from the rumble strip. I corrected the wheel immediately. The truck settled back into the center of the lane. For a second, I just stared through the windshield. Had another driver somehow seen me from miles away? It didn't seem possible. Still, I keyed the microphone. Appreciate it. Nothing. No reply. Only static. I shrugged it off. Maybe someone farther back had caught it with binoculars or brighter headlights. It was odd, but not impossible. 10 minutes later, the radio came alive again. The exact same voice, calm, steady, almost emotionless. Don't stop at exit 162. I frowned. That was strange. Truckers usually warned each other about accidents or police, not random exits. I pressed the microphone. Why? Silence. I waited. Finally, the voice answered, "Because you'll never leave." The transmission ended. No static, no goodbye, just silence. I laughed to myself. Someone had to be messing with me. Truck drivers have always loved practical jokes, but something about the man's voice bothered me. He wasn't laughing. He didn't sound threatening either. He sounded certain, as if he already knew what was going to happen. I looked at the GPS. Exit 162 was still about 25 miles away. I told myself I'd stop there anyway, buy fresh coffee, stretch my legs, prove the mystery voice wrong. Even so, I caught myself checking the mirrors every few seconds, looking for another truck. Any truck. There wasn't one, not a single pair of headlights, just me and an empty interstate stretching into the darkness. The highway stayed empty. No headlights, no taillights, nothing. Just the steady hum of 18 tires rolling across black asphalt. I kept telling myself the voice was just another trucker trying to scare people. It wasn't uncommon. Drivers had always passed the long hours with ghost stories and practical jokes. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. Every few seconds, my eyes drifted to the mirrors, empty, again and again. The GPS chimed. Exit 162 in 2 miles. I glanced at the fuel gauge, just under half a tank, more than enough to keep going. But I had been looking forward to that truck stop for almost an hour. Hot coffee, a quick bathroom break, maybe another driver to laugh about the strange radio call. The green highway sign appeared through the darkness. Exit 162. The truck stop's lights glowed in the distance, like a tiny island in the middle of nowhere. Without thinking, I reached for the turn signal. Then my hand stopped. The words echoed in my head. Don't stop at exit 162. I don't know why, but instead of signaling, I kept driving. The exit disappeared behind me. I remember laughing at myself. Congratulations, Ryan. You just let a stranger on the radio tell you where you can buy coffee. I shook my head, embarrassed. 5 minutes later, a set of headlights appeared in my mirrors. Finally, another vehicle. The headlights closed the distance quickly until they were only a few truck lengths behind me. It was another semi. The driver flashed his headlights twice. I flashed mine back. Standard trucker greeting. He pulled alongside me, an older white Kenworth. The driver rolled down his window and motioned for me to do the same. At 65 miles an hour, the wind roared between us. He leaned out and shouted, "You hear what happened back there?" I frowned. Happened where? Truck stop. What truck stop? The one at exit 162. My stomach tightened. He continued, "State police shut the place down. Some guy tried robbing the cashier. They say another trucker got shot." For a moment, I couldn't answer. The timing. It was almost exactly when I would have pulled in. The other driver shrugged. "Whole place is crawling with cops now." He gave me a wave and accelerated into the darkness. I stared after his taillights until they disappeared. Then, very slowly, I looked at the CB radio. The display glowed faintly, silent. I reached over and turned the volume down. Not off, just down. Around 3 in the morning, snow began falling. Not heavy, just enough to dance through the headlights. The temperature dropped quickly. The road became slick. I reduced my speed to 60. A few miles later, I spotted flashing amber lights ahead, a portable way station. Only one officer was working. He checked my paperwork, walked around the trailer, then handed everything back. "You're good." Normally, that would have been the end of it, but something made me ask, "Can I ask you something?" He nodded. "You hear much traffic on Channel 19 tonight?" He smiled. "Not like the old days. Most drivers just use their phones now." I hesitated. I heard somebody warning me about exit 162. The officer's expression changed. "Warning you?" I nodded. "He told me not to stop there." The officer folded his arms. "What'd the voice sound like?" I described him. Middle-aged, calm, no accent, almost comforting. The officer looked toward the highway. You know, my dad drove trucks. He always talked about hearing someone on that stretch. I chuckled. Guess it's a local legend. The officer didn't laugh. My father disappeared. The words hit harder than I expected. What? 23 years ago. His truck was found parked on the shoulder, engine still running, coffee still warm. But he was gone. No blood, no footprints, no struggle. They searched for weeks, never found him. I stood there silently. The officer continued. The last thing another driver heard over the radio was my dad talking to someone on Channel 19. A cold breeze swept through the way station. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, he handed me my paperwork. If I were you, I'd keep driving. Back on the interstate, I couldn't stop thinking about that conversation. Maybe the officer was joking. Maybe he'd made the whole story up. But something in his eyes said otherwise. The snow had stopped. The highway was empty again. I reached for my thermos. Empty. Figures. I sighed. Another hour until the next truck stop. The cab had grown strangely quiet. Even the engine seemed softer. Then, the CB radio turned itself back on. The volume knob hadn't moved, but static suddenly filled the cab, loud enough to make me jump. Then, the same voice. Ryan. Every muscle in my body tightened. I had never said my name, not once. I grabbed the microphone. Who is this? No answer. Instead, the voice spoke slowly, almost gently. You're not alone. I looked into every mirror. Nothing. Only darkness. My pulse quickened. What do you want? Silence. 5 long seconds passed. Then, check your trailer. The transmission ended. My heart pounded. I looked at the trailer camera mounted above the rear doors. The screen showed nothing unusual. The doors were still locked. The seal was intact. Everything looked normal. I almost convinced myself to ignore it. Then, something moved. A shadow, just for a split second, near the passenger side of the trailer, too quick to identify. I blinked. Gone. I told myself it had to be snow blowing across the road. It had to be. But deep down, I knew I'd seen something. Something moving where absolutely nothing should have been. The shadow was gone. I stared at the trailer camera for another 10 seconds. Nothing. The rear doors were still sealed. No movement. No flashing lights. No sign that anyone had been anywhere near my truck. I took a deep breath. You're tired. That's all this is. I'd been driving for nearly 6 hours. Lack of sleep can play tricks on your eyes. Every truck driver knows that. I turned the radio completely off this time. Not just the volume, the power switch. The display went black. Much better. No more strange voices. No more nonsense. I settled back into my seat and focused on the road. 20 minutes later, I saw the bright lights of another truck stop. This one was busy. At least a dozen semis were parked outside. People were fueling up, walking in and out of the convenience store. For the first time all night, I felt relieved. I pulled into a parking space under the brightest light I could find. Before shutting the engine off, I looked one more time at the trailer camera. Everything looked normal. I climbed down from the cab. The cold air hit me immediately. It couldn't have been more than 30 degrees. As I walked toward the back of the trailer, something caught my attention. Mud. Fresh mud. There were handprints smeared across the white trailer doors. Not fingerprints. Entire handprints, as if someone had grabbed onto the trailer with both hands. I froze. That wasn't possible. The roads had been dry for hours before the snow started, and I'd inspected those doors before leaving Omaha. They had been spotless. I crouched down. Boot prints, fresh, leading underneath the trailer. I slowly stepped backward. Every instinct told me not to look, but I had to know. I knelt, lowered my flashlight, and pointed it beneath the trailer. Nothing. Empty. Just axles, airlines, suspension parts. No person, No animal, nothing. I stood there for several seconds, trying to slow my breathing. Maybe another driver had brushed against the trailer while parking. Maybe I was imagining things. Then I heard a voice behind me. "You okay, buddy?" I nearly jumped out of my skin. An older truck driver was walking toward his rig, carrying a coffee. I forced a smile. "Yeah, thought I saw something." He looked toward my trailer, then frowned. "You hauling alone?" "Yeah." He hesitated. "When you pulled in, I thought somebody climbed off the back." Every hair on my arm stood up. "What?" He nodded slowly. Couldn't tell for sure. Looked like someone dropped off the rear bumper and walked into the darkness. My mouth went dry. "I figured they were with you." He pointed toward the parking lot, but I guess not. He climbed into his truck and drove away, leaving me standing there, alone. I immediately checked the trailer seal. Still locked, untouched. I checked the padlock. No damage, no scratches, nothing. There was no way anyone could have been inside, and yet someone else had seen exactly what I'd been afraid of. I wasn't imagining it anymore. I got back into the cab, locked every door, started the engine, and pulled back onto Interstate 80. I didn't care about coffee anymore. I just wanted daylight. It was almost 4:30 in the morning. The eastern horizon showed the faintest hint of gray. Another hour, maybe less, then sunrise. I kept telling myself that. Just make it to daylight. The CB radio remained dark, silent. I almost started believing the night was finally over. Then, without warning, the radio came back to life. The screen was still off, the power switch hadn't moved, but the speaker crackled anyway. Static filled the cab. Then, the voice, calm, steady, exactly as before. "Ryan." I didn't answer. "You need to slow down." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I'm done listening to you." Silence. Then, "You have 30 seconds. I looked around. Nothing. The highway stretched empty in both directions. No bridges, no exits, no other vehicles. My foot stayed on the accelerator. 28 seconds. The voice never counted. Somehow, I was counting in my own head. 20, 19, 18. I don't know why. Maybe fear, maybe instinct. At 15, I eased off the throttle, just a little. At 10, I touched the brake. The truck slowed from 65 to 50. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A deafening explosion shattered the silence. A massive bull elk burst through the guardrail directly in front of me. It slammed into the lane where my cab would have been seconds earlier. The animal missed my bumper by less than 3 feet. Had I still been doing highway speed, it would have come straight through my windshield. I pulled onto the shoulder with my hands shaking so badly I could barely steer. For nearly a full minute, I couldn't breathe. By sunrise, I reached the next distribution center. After unloading, I told another driver everything that had happened. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked one question. What was the voice's call sign? I stared at him. There wasn't one. The Guardian on 19. According to old truckers, every few years, someone driving alone late at night would hear a calm voice on channel 19, always warning them about danger, never asking for anything, never staying long. Nobody knew who it was. Nobody could ever trace the signal. Some believed it was another driver. Others thought it was just a legend passed around truck stops. But the strange part, every person who claimed to hear the voice survived something that should have killed them. I still drive freight today. I still work nights, and every truck I own has a CB radio. Most nights, it's completely silent. But whenever I cross that lonely stretch of Interstate 80, I switch to channel 19, just in case. I've never heard the voice again. Sometimes, late at night, when the highway is empty and the world beyond my headlights disappears into darkness, the radio gives one short burst of static, nothing more. No words, no warning, just static. almost like someone checking to see if I'm still out there. And every single time, without thinking, I answer, I'm still driving. Then I keep my eyes on the road, because if that voice ever comes back, I'm listening.